Hello everyone, I'm Raquel and I'll be going over the demographic and composition of our country, Somalia. Now, Somalia is a country that is located in Africa, and its population had been estimated in 2020 at 11,696,820, with the minorities being of Arab, Bantu, and Afar. The household headship of males was a 97.6 versus the female headship of 32.1. Currently, it's 46.1% of the population is considered urban. Now, unfortunately, Somalia scores very low on the humanitarian indicator, suffering from poor governance, protracted internal conflicts, social, gender, and religious inequalities, and environmental degradation. And despite their situations of civil war and famine raising its mortality rate, Somalia's actually high fertility rate and large proportion of people of reproductive age maintain a rapid growth, and with each generation being larger than the prior one. It is estimated that more than 60% of Somalia's population is younger than 25, which indicates that the fertility rate is among the world's highest at almost 6 children per woman, which a rate that had decreased since the 1970s. With their composition, according to Somalia's Federal Republic National Bureau of Statistics, their main economy is raising livestock, as well as understanding that with their obstacles of the demographic that they're living in, warfare, famine, and climate irregularities are their main obstacles that still have been in construction and are still at times in critical condition for this smaller country. We have seen that Somalia has endured some hardships throughout the years of its establishment, and its location of a total area of 637,657 square kilometers. It's almost 5 times the size of Alabama, which is slightly smaller than Texas. Their terrain is mostly flat to undulating plateau rising to the hills of the north. Their mean elevation is 410 meters, their lowest point, which is at 0 meters, and that's where we hit the Indian Ocean. Their highest point is Mount Shimbiris, which is at the 2,460 meter highest point of elevation. In agricultural land, as I said before, farm raising, livestock, cows is their main trade. They have irrigated land. Distribution varies throughout the country. Least densely populated areas are in the northeast and the central regions, as well as the areas along the Kenyan border. I hope this gives you a little bit of clarity and insight into this country of Somalia. Thank you.
Religion is a key aspect of everyday life for all Somalians. Islam is the majority religion and is strongly linked to the Somalian national identity. This provides a unified identity for all Somalians regardless of their affiliations or cultural backgrounds. The Islam religion is monotheistic, meaning that they worship one all-knowing God, who in Arabic is known as Allah. Followers of Islam aim to live a life of complete submission to Allah. They believe that nothing can happen without His permission and humans have free will. Islam teaches that Muhammad was the final prophet and that Allah's words were revealed to him through the angel Gabriel. Somalians tend to be more religious than other Muslim African populations. For example, the idea of a non-practicing Muslim is very unusual in Somalia. Everyone is expected to practice the religion to some degree, and according to the Federal Ministry of Religious Affairs, more than 99% of the population is Sunni Muslim. Although everyone is expected to practice the Sunni Muslim religion, there are still a minority of religions in Somalia. This includes the Sufi community, Christians, and the Shia Muslims. Members of minority religious groups are commonly immigrants and foreign workers, mainly from East African countries. Conversion from Islam to another religion is socially unacceptable in all areas, and those suspected of conversions may face harassment by members of their community and be subjected to extreme danger. Religious minorities are susceptible to being prosecuted under Islamic law surrounding apostasy and blasphemy. This includes minority Muslim groups.
Somalia is the easternmost country of Africa. It is located on the Horn of Africa and the east side of Ethiopia, with its capital being Mogadishu, which is located just north of the equator on the Indian Ocean. The Somali language belongs to the Cushitic branch of the Afro-Asiatic language family and is the official language. The second official language of Somalia is Arabic, which is spoken mainly in northern Somalia and in coastal towns. Somalis also have a good understanding of Italian and English, since they're the languages used at the country's colleges and universities. Cholera, measles, tuberculosis, and malaria are widespread throughout the country. The absence of health or welfare infrastructure in the country has left international relief organizations struggling to provide essential services normally offered by the government. Cultural activities consist of poetry, folk dancing, the performance of plays, and singing. Also extremely important to Somalis is astrology, which is thought to provide divinations of the days ahead. Some Somalis believe that certain stars, constellations, and eclipses can presage everything from the coming of rain to a massacre.
History of Somalia. Somali people began settling in the north and then continued southward as history progressed, while also building coastal trading towns along the Horn of Africa. Islam was firmly established in the north of Somalia by the 10th century AD. Migrations began forming to the south and the west, which led to clans forming among the Somali people. In the 19th century, the scramble for Africa included the Horn of Africa that Somalia rests on. European countries, including Britain, France, and Italy, and other countries such as Egypt and Ethiopia, were heavily interested in controlling Somalia's coastal ports. By the 20th century, Britain and Italy controlled significant territory in Somalia. British Somaliland faced a difficult revolt that required many resources to defeat. After World War II, Britain and Italy were given 10 years to prepare Somalia for independence. Italy and Britain released their territories, which joined together as the Somali Republic in 1960. Major problems arose between the former Italian and British territories. When war broke out from 1963 to 1967, Somalia turned to the Soviet Union for support against Ethiopia and Kenya, but still remained pro-Western. In 1978, Somalia lost the Ogaden War against the Soviet and Cuban-supported Ethiopia. Being weak from losing the war, Somalia destabilized and a coup occurred in 1978. The Somali Salvation Democratic Front and Somali National Movement were formed based on clan allegiances and began a civil war with each other. Numerous attempts at peace from the United Nations failed to stop the conflict. In the 2000s, multiple peace conferences led to transitional Somali governments being imposed for years at a time. By August of 2012, a provisional constitution was adopted, and parliament candidates were chosen from Somali elders. Parliament elected Somalia's new president in 2017. However, the election was tainted by allegations of intimidation, violence, and corruption.
Christian history in Somalia dates all the way back from the 10th to 12th century. There are Arab sources stating that the port of Silac, also known as Zalia, was known as a Christian city. But that changed by the 15th century, when the Christian religion was greatly decreasing, and it was not until 1881 that Christianity was reintroduced into Somalia by missionaries. The religion continued to grow after the Italians gained control of the southern coast. During this time, there was colonial rule by British and Italian forces, and there were moments where they were against missionaries teaching the Christian religion to Somalians because they were feared instability. In 1886, French Roman Catholic missionaries and Swedish overseas Lutheran missionaries set up bases in multiple British territories, and in 1898, the Swedish Lutheran missionaries had found Somalia. The mission was to put a stop when Italian authorities chose to remove missionary in 1935. However, after World War II, missionaries went back to Somalia during the 1950s. This did change in 1969 when President Mohammed Said Barre ordered his military to confiscate property owned by missionaries and churches. This did include schools and clinics. By 1976, all missionaries had left the country. But then in the 1980s, few missionaries were able to return back to Somalia, and in 1990s, President Said Barre was removed from government. The country no longer had law and was in chaos. However, Christian missionaries took this opportunity, and many international Christian organizations had returned to Somalia. Today, the number of Christians have decreased and meet in secrecy.
Theological figures and church leaders. There are no known church leaders within Somalian borders. Due to extreme level of persecution of Christians, no information is provided as a precaution for individuals and their families' preservation of life.
Contemporary issues in the church. The most prominent contemporary issue regarding the church in Somalia is its secrecy, and it's connected to the country's lack of religious freedom. Due to the country's predominant religion, Islam, it forces the people who follow a different religion to hide in fear of persecution. The church is behind closed doors due to the ongoing threat of the Al-Qaeda, which is one of the many Muslim extremist groups located in Somalia. In order to worship in Somalia, it has to be behind closed doors. Additionally, the congregation in the church is unable to publicly profess that they are Christians and followers of Christ. Leaving the Islamic religion is seen as a betrayal in Somalia, and therefore they feel the need that it must be dealt with as such. For instance, if the Christians choose to publicly worship and profess their religion, then they will be killed immediately. Since the church faces many threats, the contemporary issues regard its secrecy.
Contemporary issues in society. Unfortunately, Somalia has a corrupt government, which is rated the most corrupt government in the world by Transparency International. Contributing to this corrupt government is the fact that many government employees in Somalia are severely underpaid and drastically overworked. The government is also heavily influenced by terrorist organizations in and around Somalia, such as Al-Shabaab. Somalia has been prone to terrorism for decades. This is in part due to poor infrastructure and corrupt government, but also due to their geographical location since they are near the ocean, which attracts many ships and promotes pirating. Somalia has great potential to be a desirable tourist destination, but due to its terrorism problems, Somalia is currently ranked by the U.S. government as a level 4 do not travel country. According to the United States travel government website, the reason for this warning is due to the fact that pirates have been seen actively in the waters of the Horn of Africa. Somalia is also facing an extreme famine brought on by conflict within Somalia's community. As reported by ActionAgainstHunger.org, there are currently 360,000 children suffering from malnutrition and 6.2 million people in need of humanitarian assistance in Somalia. Due to the persistent violence, Somalia's infrastructure has been greatly diminished over the years. Many of the buildings are still destroyed from previous conflicts and war, which makes it difficult for traffic and for people to get around throughout the city.